When Simon Sinek looked at the most successful organisations, he recognised that not only do they know what they do, they also know why they do it. They've actually gone to the trouble of asking, why do we exist? While they may have ended up doing the same thing as the other organisations, there was usually something quite different about that organisation and its relationship with its customers. Understanding the why of any organisation, including the church, is critical to us being better at what we do. So why do we exist as a church? Perhaps we need to take a quick trip through the Bible. Have you ever wondered why there's so much violence and bloodshed in the Old Testament? It's a pretty difficult time, there's some awful stories there. But the reason is that it was a multi-theistic society, and in those situations there's a lot of fear. People believed in lots of different gods, and so they had to keep the gods happy. And if the gods weren't happy, they were afraid of what the outcome might be. So for instance, if you had an agricultural economy, you depended on the gods to provide the good crops, and therefore the whole economy depended on that. And people lived in fear of what might happen if they didn't keep the gods happy. And so as we progress through the Old Testament, we then come to that place where there's an introduction to the Ten Commandments. Into this world of fear and violence, the Ten Commandments were introduced. And these Ten Commandments brought about something completely new to people. The whole idea that there was only one God. The first 4 of those commandments said that there is only one God, and the next 6 introduced something completely new again, and that was that they were to think about the needs of the people around them, to think about relationships in a way that hadn't been addressed in the past. These 10 commandments became a pathway that was leading towards Jesus. One day a very wise person came up to Jesus and said, "So what's the greatest commandment?" And together they talked about it and agreed that the greatest commandment was love the Lord your God and love your neighbour as yourself. In fact, Jesus also said, "A new commandment I bring to you, love one another." Hey, that's what the 10 Commandments were all about. The first 4 are about loving God, and the next 6 are about loving your neighbour. Instead of law and fear, Jesus introduced something new into the equation, love. It was there all the time, but he introduced it in a fresh way. And as we go through the New Testament, we discover it's everywhere. The footprints of God showing up in verses like that famous verse in John's Gospel, God loved the world so much that he gave his only son. 1 Corinthians 13 is described as the great love chapter. It's all about love. And then in the next chapter, Paul states, let love be your highest goal. So it seems to me that this progression from this fear-based society to the 10 Commandments, which said, we need to think about this in a different way, leads us eventually to Jesus coming and fulfilling the original commandments. It was as if he was filling the old with something new. He was filling it with love. In fact, John tells us in one of his letters that perfect love drives out fear. I want to put to you today that love needs to be the why of the church. Love is why we exist as a church. Primarily, the love God has for us, our love for him, and our love for one another. Now go back to your workbook and look up some of those passages about love and share with the rest of your group about what we've been talking about.